Member for Menzies.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, we welcome this MPI from the member for Goldstein and from those opposite to talk about tax, because, of course, we're the party of lower taxes. We took lower taxes to the last election. Those opposite opposed them, and those opposite are going to oppose our tax cuts again this time. We're cutting income taxes 5 times. Now, in the last term, our stage 3 tax cuts provided tax cuts for all Australians, and importantly, they preserved our progressive tax system against those opposite who sought to flatten the tax system so that those on lower incomes and those on higher incomes were taxed at the same rate. And so our stage 3 tax cuts particularly benefited low and middle income earners, those who need relief from cost of living pressures the most. Now, we're also providing a tax cut at the end of this financial year in just a few weeks. Again, a tax cut that was opposed by those opposite, and will provide a tax cut at the end of the next financial year. And thanks to this budget, we'll also have the $1,000 instant tax deduction. Now, for those workers in our electorate, they won't have to collect piles of receipts in order to claim that deduction. We know that there's too much life admin for everybody, but particularly for busy working families who've got kids to look after, who have to pay the bills, who've got to run their kids around to school sport, in between their busy jobs. They don't have time to collect all this paperwork, and so this instant tax deduction is especially going to benefit those hard-working taxpayers and hard-working families in the low and middle income bracket. It will save people time. It will also save public administration. So it will also provide real cost of living relief for people who need it most. And we'll have the $250 working Australians tax offset. It's a permanent, targeted tax cut that will benefit 13 million workers, systemic change that will address bracket creep, and will mean that the total amount of our tax cuts for the average worker will benefit them $2,800 in a year, and that is going to make a real difference for households that we know are having a hard time, that we know are struggling with cost of living pressures, thanks to international inflation pressures. Things like the war in the Middle East, which those opposite often like to deny, is having effects at the bowser and having flow-on effects throughout the supply chain. This will mean that those families will have real cost of living relief, those households will have real cost of living relief. Because we want a system where work is not taxed at a higher rate than wealth, where a nurse or a teacher or someone working in retail or hospitality, the hard-working people in our electorates, are not paying a higher rate of tax than somebody who's receiving income from money that's achieved through passive means, things like shares, things like property investment. This is part of the big reforming budget. We have structural issues within our economy. We have an ageing population. We have a shrinking workforce. And we want to make sure that those hard-working Australians can continue to get ahead, and an increasing proportion of that tax burden is falling on working Australians. That's not a trajectory that we want to allow to continue, just like we don't want to continue on the trajectory of decreasing home ownership rates, and that's something that this budget addresses as well. We want all Australians to be rewarded for their hard work and their aspiration with the opportunity to buy a home of their own. We want them to be able to have a level playing field when they go to an auction with property investors, and we're already seeing stories of first home buyers being able to go to auctions, and now they're not being outbid by property investors. First homeowners can go and get a key for the first home that they're going to own and be able to put down roots. They're going to be able to work on their home, to put down roots in the community, to plan for the future and plan for their families, and send their kids to local schools without knowing that they might have to move to another suburb if their landlord decides, I'm going to sell up, or I'm going to put a family member into this house. It's really important that all Australians have the ability to aspire to home ownership, because it's an essential part of the social contract that governments can promise people hope for the future and a secure future, and home ownership is an essential part of that. We've seen that there's growing wealth disparity in Australia, and again, people being able to own their own home is a really important part of that, And when the capital gains tax discount was introduced, the 50% capital gains tax discount was introduced in '99, it distorted the housing market, and this budget fixes that.